There was a time when Amelia believed she was fine. She smiled when people looked her way, laughed at the right moments, and said, "I'm okay," so many times that even the echo began to sound real. But deep down, beneath all the practiced calm, there was a quiet ache, a constant hum in her chest that never truly went away. It was the sound of everything she'd never said, every goodbye she never understood, and every piece of herself she left behind just to keep others comfortable. She didn't know when it started. Maybe it was the day she learned that silence keeps the peace. Or maybe it was the moment she realized some people only love the version of you that doesn't make them uncomfortable. Either way, the ache had been with her for years, patient, unhurried, waiting for her to finally stop running. The world around her moved fast. Emails, deadlines, messages that demanded replies. People coming and going, laughter spilling through conversations she couldn't quite keep up with. She smiled anyway, because that's what she did best. Until one morning, she couldn't. The sunlight fell differently that day, heavy, golden, almost too bright. She sat by the window with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the soft steam fatting into nothing. And something inside her whispered enough. Enough pretending, enough holding everything together, enough trying to fix everyone else while ignoring the cracks in her own soul. It was terrifying, that kind of honesty, because healing, she realized, wasn't soft or beautiful. It was raw. It was sitting with the ache until it stopped being a stranger. It was looking at her reflection and admitting she didn't know who she was anymore. So she started small. She took walks without her phone, let the quiet stretch around her like a blanket she'd forgotten the warmth of. She cried, not in a cinematic way, not with music playing softly in the background, but the kind of crying that made her chest tremble and her throat burn, the kind that leaves you empty enough to finally breathe again. Some days she hated it, the stillness, the honesty, the way the past would crawl back in just when she thought she was doing better. Healing wasn't linear, she learned that quickly. It came in waves. One moment she felt alive again, and the next as she was drowning in old memories she thought she'd buried. But somewhere between the falling apart and the putting herself back together, something subtle began to change. She noticed the way the morning air smelled after it rained, clean, forgiving. She started keeping a small notebook by her bed, writing down one good thing each day. Some days it was big, like finishing a project or reconnecting with an old friend. Other days, it was as small as, "I smiled at myself in the mirror today and meant it." She learned to stop apologizing for taking up space, to say no when her heart whispered that something didn't feel right, to stop chasing the approval of people who never truly saw her. And then, one evening, she found herself walking through the park near her apartment. The world was painted in gold and soft pink, the kind of sunset that feels almost unreal. A small breeze brushed through her hair, carrying the scent of the sea even though she was miles away. She sat on a worn wooden bench, the same one she used to visit months ago, back when her heart was heavier. This time, it felt different. She realized she was sitting there not to escape, but to be. And that's when she saw her, a little girl chasing bubbles across the path, her laughter echoing like sunlight on water. Amelia watched her for a while, something tightening in her chest. The girl stumbled, fell, and for a second looked lost. But then she got up, brushed the dirt off her knees, and laughed again, louder this time. Something about that moment broke Amelia open in the gentlest way, because that little girl was her. The part of her that used to believe she could fall and still find joy in getting back up. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't about being healed. It was about choosing to heal even when it hurt, even when it was messy and slow, even when no one else understood. Because healing wasn't a destination. It was a decision, one she'd keep making, again and again, every morning she woke up and chose to face herself instead of running. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the loud kind that demanded to be seen, but a quiet peace that simply was. the kind that didn't erase the pain but softened its edges. Later that night, she stood by her window again, the same window where she'd once stared into the light, lost and tired. But now she could see the stars. They'd always been there, she'd just been too busy surviving to look up. She realized something then: healing doesn't change who you are. It brings you home to yourself. And for the first time in a long time, Amelia didn't feel like a stranger in her own story. She was both, the broken and the whole, the question and the answer, the scar and the healing. The world outside was still loud, still demanding, still uncertain, but she no longer needed to match its chaos. Her heart had learned a new rhythm, slower, steadier, real. She whispered into the quiet night, her voice trembling but certain, "I'm still here." And maybe that was enough. Maybe that had always been enough. Because sometimes, choosing to heal isn't about finding joy. It's about giving yourself permission to exist, even when it hurts. To hold the broken pieces without trying to fix them all at once. To trust that one day they'll fit again, differently, beautifully. And maybe tomorrow she'd wake up and feel heavy again. Maybe she'd cry without knowing why. But she'd still choose herself. She'd still choose to heal again and again, because that's what resilience truly is. Not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep loving yourself through it. And as the city lights flickered outside her window, Amelia smiled softly, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood that it didn't have to be. Somewhere deep within her, the ache that once ruled her heart had quieted into something gentler, something like peace. And perhaps your own healing is unfolding too, quietly, patiently, in the spaces you least expect. Maybe, just like Amelia, you're learning to choose yourself, one fragile breath at a time. And if tonight's story found a place in your heart, maybe your next light waits quietly beyond the words here, on the tales beyond word.